Hi everyone, I hope you're doing really well. Welcome to What the Horror, where this humble horror fan shares her thoughts on horror films past and present. In today's episode, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I wanted to start a series where I review a film and compare it to its book counterpart. And for the first episode of this series, I'm looking at Sleepy Hollow and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Normally at this part of the episode I would give a spoiler warning, but what I'm going to do in this episode is talk about the film and talk about the book completely spoiler free, and then after that I'll compare both of them together, and that's when I'll get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film or read the book, you can leave at that point, go and watch them and read them, and then come back to the episode. But the spoilers won't be until the comparison section at the end. Okay, so let's look at the film first, Sleepy Hollow. It was directed by Tim Burton and released in 1999 and has quite a stellar cast in Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Miranda Richardson, Christopher Lee, Michael Gambon and Christopher Walken. Johnny Depp stars as the film's hero Ichabod Crane, a New York policeman who is sent to a small town named Sleepy Hollow to investigate the deaths of 3 people who have had their heads stricken from their bodies. Crane, a man of sense and reason, is forced to re-evaluate his beliefs after it becomes clear the culprit may not be one of flesh and blood. Okay, I have to start by saying I am a really big fan of Sleepy Hollow. I absolutely adore the aesthetic of the film, and I know that Tim Burton has a very distinct style, which isn't always going to be to everybody's taste, and that's okay. But I love almost everything about the look of this film. The opening scenes of the film, including the cold open and Ichabod's journey to Sleepy Hollow, are absolutely beautiful. It's full of imagery of cornfields, flashes of lightning, shadows and soft lighting, dramatic skylines and silhouettes of dead and bare trees. And it's scored with horse hooves and crows cawing and rumbles of thunder, and of course over the top of all of that is Danny Elfman's haunting soundtrack. The film has an almost monochromatic effect. It has a high use of deep reds and the odd orange and blue sprinkled throughout. To help the fantasy and supernatural aspect of the film, Burton and his director of photography Emmanuel Lubezki used a lot of smoke and soft lighting, and then they also increased the film's contrast in post-production to help add to the monochromatic effect of the film. Tim Burton's interest in directing a horror film was partially inspired by his love of Hammer Film Productions, and as such, Sleepy Hollow actually pays homage to various Hammer Film productions such as Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, and some of the Universal monster films such as Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. I think the film's aesthetic is aided by Burton's want to build a lot of the sets and film in a controlled environment, again taking inspiration from the Hammer Film Productions where they filmed primarily on sound stages, and Burton felt that this is what helped add to the supernatural aspect of the films. The sets certainly help the audience immerse in the world of Sleepy Hollow, but I was reading that some of the actors were really grateful for them as well. And there was one in particular who had just finished filming Star Wars Episode 1: Phantom Menace, and after filming with a lot of blue screen and green screen, they loved the full-scale practical sets, and it really helped them get into the right frame of mind of the character, and it helped to build this world that they were trying to create. The screenplay for the film has been adapted and extended for the screen because the original story is only a short story, and in doing so they've also included some changes which we'll get into more in the comparison section. But what I like is that it means you can either watch the film first or read the book first, it doesn't matter which, and it won't spoil the other one for you. I like the pacing of the film as well. It never feels boring, it never feels like it's dragging, and the gradual reveal of the mystery side of the story and the compiling of evidence by Ichabod Crane runs along really nicely, and the eventual reveal after a few red herrings is a really good and effective one. One negative I have about the film is its occasional use of digital effects. Now, I know the film is from 1999, so the effects aren't going to hold up brilliantly, but the odd time that they are used, they're almost laughable and they do pull me out of the film in that moment. But thankfully, Burton doesn't rely on them and they are used only a handful of times. and generally he will use sets and practical effects where he can. So the book is titled The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It was written by Washington Irving and it was published in 1820. I hadn't read the book before this, but as I am a big fan of the film, I was really excited about giving it a read and checking out the original source material. I was also looking forward to a cozy, spooky ghost story, seeing as how it's October and it's the season, but it wasn't quite what I expected. It's less of a ghost story and more a story about a ghost story, and I know that doesn't really make sense at the moment, but it will make more sense when we delve into the comparisons at the end of the video. Irving has a beautiful way of writing, and he has a really dry, sharp wit to him and his work, and I was pleasantly surprised by the level of humour that I actually found in the story. At times though, I did feel a bit frustrated with his writing. Irving is a very descriptive writer, and he indulges himself and the reader in his obvious love for the autumnal season, in the weather and the colourings and the food, and his descriptions are rich and charming, but at times they're bordering on excessive, and they become distracting from the actual story itself. One thing I will say about the book, and this isn't a negative, but I think it's a point worth raising, is if you are wanting to check it out, you might want to have a dictionary to hand. I have in the past read quite a few books from the early 1800s, and as the years have gone on, I've become more comfortable reading and understanding the Old English language. However, in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, there were still plenty of words that I didn't know the meaning of, and I had to look them up. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book. In fact, I actually found it quite interesting to find out the meanings of these new words, but I would have struggled to read it if I didn't have the dictionary on hand, or I would have struggled to get all of the levels of information without a dictionary on hand. Okay, so from this point on, we will be getting into spoilers as I want to compare the book with the film. So if you haven't seen or read them and you don't want spoilers, that would be your cue to go. Thank you for listening, and of course, don't forget you can always come back to the episode when you have either watched the film or read the book. There are quite a few differences between the book and the film, which I did expect, because whenever a book is adapted for the screen, there are changes made because there are just certain things that don't translate into film. But I have to say, after watching the film and reading the book, these two feel like very different material. In the book, Ichabod Crane is a school teacher and a resident of Sleepy Hollow, and he is the story's hero, but the events are actually told through the eyes of an unnamed narrator. Whereas in the film, Ichabod Crane is a police detective from New York who is sent to Sleepy Hollow, and again he is the film's hero, and the audience follows the unfolding events alongside Ichabod. Ichabod's appearance is also different between the book and the film. In the book, Ichabod is described as being tall, exceedingly lank, with long arms and legs. He has a small flat-top head, glassy green eyes, huge ears, and a long snipe nose. And in the film, Ichabod Crane looks like Johnny Depp. I was interested to read, although not really surprised, I suppose, but interested to read that Depp wanted to embrace Irving's description of Ichabod Crane, but the film's production company didn't really like the idea. So instead, when Depp had read the script, he decided to make his Ichabod a very delicate, fragile man who's very in touch with his feminine side. And he actually took inspiration from Angela Lansbury's portrayal in Death on the Nile, which, if I'm honest, could quite frankly be one of the best film facts I've ever read in my life. There are lots of characters that are in both the book and the film. There's the hero Ichabod Crane, his love interest Katrina Van Tassel, her father Baltus Van Tassel, and Ichabod's love rival Brom Van Brunt. All the other characters in the film are just new additions for the film. They're not from the book. And the film also makes a change in that in the book, Katrina still has her mother, but in the film they change it that Katrina's mother has died and now has a stepmom. And this part of the change is actually quite vital to the final reveal of the film. In the film, there's also the addition of the subplot to do with Ichabod's childhood. Now, I don't hate this subplot. I think some of the visuals are really beautiful, but the problem is with the visuals, they're very vibrant and colourful at times, and it can be, it feels very disjointed with the rest of the film's aesthetic. Another difference between the book and the film is in the film, Ichabod ends up with his love interest Katrina and his rival Brom is killed by the horsemen. But in the book, Ichabod and Katrina only have a brief flirtation, and by the end of the book, Katrina ends up marrying Brom van Brunt. For me, the biggest difference between the book and the film is that the film is very clear on the existence of the Headless Horseman. We are given a backstory, an origin to him, and lore onto how he can be controlled by someone to commit the killings. And in the film, the person controlling him is actually Katrina's stepmom, who witnessed the Hessians' murder in the woods when she was a young child, and promised that she would use him to seek revenge on the people who wronged her and her family. I enjoy this reveal, and I think that Miranda Richardson does a fantastic job portraying the character as she progresses from kind lady of the house to adulterous wife to murderous, unhinged villain at the end of the film. In the book, the Headless Horseman is actually only a very small part of the story. He's a local ghost story in Sleepy Hollow, and its residents share stories with each other of their experiences and their meetings with the horseman, but none of these meetings ever end in death. He's also one of many ghost stories in Sleepy Hollow, and he's never given an origin or a backstory, and we don't actually meet him until the last few pages of the book when Ichabod Crane crosses paths with him. And even then, Irving leaves it very ambiguous, and it's up to the reader themselves to decide if the meeting between Ichabod and the Headless Horseman was genuine, or if instead it was actually a prank played on Ichabod by Brom van Brunt. So that is Sleepy Hollow and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I have to say, I really do love this film, and I think that it is perfect viewing for this time of year, seeing as how it's the spooky season and we are fully in autumn. And I did enjoy the book. It wasn't quite what I expected, but it was fun nonetheless. I would recommend giving it a go if you haven't. It's not a long read as it's only a short story, so it's easy enough to read in a couple of hours. I do have a little anecdote to do with Sleepy Hollow. It's not really that interesting. It's just that it is one of the handful of films that genuinely scared me on first viewing. And I think maybe it wasn't just the film itself, but it was helped by the fact that when I was younger, when I watched it, I was living with my parents and we lived opposite a farm that had fields with horses and sheep in and things like that. And one night I was in the garden. It was a very dark and very foggy night. And as I was stood in the garden, I could hear horse hooves galloping across this misty, foggy field. And the experience absolutely terrified me. So thank you as always to all of you for stopping by and listening to this humble horror fan's thoughts. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.